Ambience, לפני אוהל מועד, Zevachim Daf Amud Beis. We've spoken about the fact how moving places changes the person. It doesn't mean you change your identity completely. A person's identity is very big. It's just different facets appear in different places depending on where we are. And we talked about that an individual in the marketplace is a different person from an individual on the beach or an individual inside shul. An individual sitting in his living room is different from an individual in his bedroom. We change who we are. We manifest different aspects of ourselves depending on the place we are. And so changing place, that's a bit of Meshaneh Makom, Meshaneh Mazal. You can change your place in order to change your being. And as you change your being, you change your energy. And with changed energy, you can have a different impact on the world, a different effect on the world. So one of the tools is the place in which you find yourself. And we talked about that. It's not only with people, it's with things as well. And that's part of the reason that Masechta Shabbos starts with the Melacha of Hitzor. Because Hitzor, to move an object from Rishus HaYochid to a Rishus HaRabim or vice versa, you're changing the place, and that's in some way changes the object. It's a creative act in the object. Although you're not engineering the object, you're engineering its position. And by engineering its position, you're to some degree changing its place as well. So we see in many places in Halakha the impact of place on object or on subject, on the individual himself. What we learned today is how ambience can change a place. You don't have to move from one house to another, or from inside to outside, or from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYochid. You can actually stay in the same place and change the place. So ambience changes the place, and place changes the person, which means ambience changes the person as well. And we've become a little bit insensitive to ambience. We're not as tuned into it as we sometimes need to be. Many years ago, I was in Japan on a trip, and we stayed at a genuine Japanese inn, which is an experience everybody should have at least once. And beautiful place out in the countryside, absolutely gorgeous. They take us to our room when we arrive there, and there's this magnificent, beautiful room. I can still see it in front of me, although it was many, many years ago. I can see the view outside onto the grass and the forests and the lakes. It was just absolutely gorgeous. The only problem was I looked around this magnificent room. There was no place to sleep. There was no bed in the room. And I tried to talk to the attendant about it, but there was a language difficulty, and they just smiled and bowed and walked out. And there they left us in a room without a place to sleep. Anyway, later on, it came time to go and get something to eat. We came back into the room. It wasn't the same room. It had been transformed into a magical place of rest and tranquility and beds. It had been completely transformed. The room was the same room, and yet it wasn't the same room. The space had been transformed by a transformation of ambience. And we'll use that to understand the difficult Rambam, an amazing Rav Eliakim that I found in Masechta Yuma. The Rambam, I'll start with the Rambam at the bottom of the page, is in Maaseh HaKorbanos in Perikei Halacha Hey, where he says, Shlamim sheshechatam kodem sheyiftechu delatot ha'hichal. If you shecht a korban shlomim, before the doors of the Heichal have opened. So, inside the Beis HaMikdash, we've talked about that. There was the Mizbeach. Behind the Mizbeach was the Heichal. There was first the lobby, there was an Ulam, and then the Ulam led into the Heichal, where you had the Menorah and the Shulchan and the Mizbeach Hazov, and further in the Kodesh Kedoshim, and there was a door that closed off the Heichal, and that door used to be closed every night. If you brought a Shlomim before they opened that door in the morning, Psulin, the Shlomim is possible. So that would seem to be the Rambam is teaching us a law of time, that the Shlomim has to be brought at a time that the door is open. The problem is the Rambam is in Hilchos Maaseh HaKorbanos in Perikei, where all the previous Rambams there are about place, about where to bring a korban, not when to bring a korban. And here he seems to be talking about timing. So let's go through the sugya and understand where the Rambam gets it from. So we have two psukim in Perek Gimel and Vayikra, both talking about Shlomim. The first one says, Ushechato petach oel moed, you should slaughter the korban Shlomim at the entrance to the oel moed. And the other one says, V'shachato to lifnei oel moed, you should shech the animal before the oil moed, also in front of the oil moed. And the Gemara says on that Nunhei Amud Aleph, on the previous Amud, that we learn from these psukim and others that lachshir kol aruchot bekodshim kalin. Kodshim Kedoshim, the severe Kodshim, have to be slaughtered in the north area of the Azara. But the Kodshim Kalim can be slaughtered anywhere. So if they can be slaughtered anywhere, it's clear that these psukim are not coming to tell us about a specific place that they have to be slaughtered. So what are they telling us? Ask the Gemara, why in one place does it say Petach Oel Moed and one Lifnei Oel Moed? What's it teaching us? Kamash Balan, the Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, the Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. It comes to teach us the law of Shmuel, that Shlamim Sheshechatam Kodim Sheyiftechu Latot Heichal Psulin, that shlomim which are shechted before the gates are open are posel. Says the Gemara, this is not about place, this is about time. It's not coming to tell us that you've got to slaughter it exactly in front of the door, because you can slaughter it on the sides as well. It doesn't have to be exactly in front of the door, but it does have to be at the time that the doors are open. Which again makes that Rambam difficult, because the Rambam seems to be talking about in the section that deals with place. Says Rashi, the same Gemara appears in Gemara Eruvin, appears also in Gemara Yuma, other places. Rashi says in Eruvin, Shlamim sheshechatan shachris, kodem ptichat latot haichal. Rashi makes it very clear we're talking about timing, not about place. If the shlomim is shechted before the gates are opened, that is possible. That's what the Rambam brings. Asks Tosfos in Eruvin as well, why do I need a special posuk to give me the timing of the shlomim? We already know that you can't bring any korban before the first tamid. The korban tamid, there are not two korban tamids. There's one korban tamid. One half of it is brought in the morning, one half of it is brought in the evening. Keves echad, keves echad. And before you bring the early morning tamid, you can't bring any other korban. And says Tosfos, we know you can't bring the Tomid before the gates are open. So how is it possible to bring a Shlomim before the gates are open? That's not even possible, so why do you need a special posuk? Tosfos answers several answers, and one, he says, Inami hacha itzrich kisheniftechu v'chazru v'nin alu. This is not talking about necessarily bringing it before the gate opens, even if the gate opened, and at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the Kohanim wanted to take a coffee break, so they closed the Yoren, they closed the Heichal, and they went off for coffee. At that time, somebody wants to bring a Korban Shlomim. You can't, because the gate is closed. So it's not about the timing, it's about the gate being opened, the door being opened. Even if it's during a time you're allowed to do it, the door has to be opened. So we have a Machlokes, Rashi and Tosfos in Eruvin. We have a difference of opinion between Rashi and Tosfos in Eruvin as to whether this din means you're not allowed to bring your Korban Shlomim in the morning before they open the door of the Heichal, or it means any time in the day you can't bring it if the doors of the Heichal are not open. Explains Rabbeinu Eliakim. I've quoted Rabbeinu Eliakim a few times in Masechta Yuma. We don't have a lot of him. He wrote a lot. Rabbeinu Eliakim was a friend of Rashi's, and he learned from the same Rabbeim as Rashi did. That's the Talmudim of Rabbeinu Gershom. And unfortunately, we have him quoted, and we have him on Masechta Yuma. And in Masechta Yuma, on Daf Samach Beis, he deals with why dafka shlomim. Rashi says on our Daf Samach Aleph in Masechta, we'll soon get to it. Rashi says this is only shlomim. It's not the other korban. This limud that we have, that we learn here on Daf Nun Hey, that's only korban shlomim. Ask Rabbeinu Yochim, why only korban shlomim? And he answers beautifully, mishum de shlamim havu doron, because shlomim are a gift. Why do you bring an oila? Because you should have done something and you didn't. Why do you bring a chatas? Because you shouldn't have done something and you did. There's a reason, there's an obligation. You bring a musaf because it's at the particular time that you have to bring it. You're obligated either by circumstance or by time. Those are all the other korbanot. But a shlamim is a donation. You just give it because you want to. There's nothing forcing you to do that. And a doron tzarich la'avio lifnei adono shemevio lo. You don't get a gift delivered. I know nowadays we do that. But it's much better to take it yourself and to give it to the person yourself. We value convenience a lot, so we've outsourced all of our human relationships. And there's very little left that we've left to actually do face-to-face. We do meetings on Zoom, we send emails and messages, we have things delivered. We don't go into a store and talk to the shopkeeper and buy something from him. Everything's done anonymously through these anonymous transactions, even gifting. Says Rabbeinu Eliakim, when you gift to Hashem, don't have it delivered. Deliver it yourself. Be lifnei Hashem. Be in front of Hashem. The door needs to be open. Knock at His door and bring your shlomim to the Ribono Shalom. Bring it to the door. Hachanami lefichach tzarich shiyu dlatot ha'echal ptuchim ulach at shlomim. That's why it's shlomim, because the door must be open. You can't give a gift through a closed door. You've got to give the gift to something that's open. And that's the idea of the shlomim. But then again, the Rambam becomes different. So according to Rabbeinu Eliakim, this is about the doors being open. I understand Tosfos, who says it doesn't matter what time of the day, it's about the doors being open. But according to Rashi and the Rambam, who seem to say it's about timing, and yet we see, according to the Rambam, is it really about timing? He brings it in the halachas of space, of place. He brings it in Perek Hey of Maaseh HaKorbanos, he brings it, where we're talking about place. So there's something difficult going on here. Is this about place or about time? No, it's not about time, says Rabbeinu Eliakim. It's about being lifnei Hashem. Yes, if you do it too early in the morning, the door isn't opened. You can't bring a gift. So what we've got to understand is the Rambam is talking about place. You've got to bring the shlomim in a specific place. What is that place? It's the place where you can deliver your gift to Hashem directly. And that's a different place from when the door is closed. When the door is opened and when the door is closed, the place is different. It's completely different. It's like when the laws of yichud, for example, a man and a woman go into an open area, and even if they're alone, but the door is open, people are coming, and the man goes and closes the door and turns the lock. Instantly, everything is changed. The whole dynamic has changed. Everything's different. You've closed the door. Doors open, doors closed, it's different. You open the Aron Kodesh or you close the Aron Kodesh. Sometimes people want to use the shul for simchas, and they put a barrier in front of the shul, the Aron Kodesh, so it doesn't look like there's an Aron Kodesh there. When you shut a part of the room out, the room changes. If the door to the Heichal is closed, it's not a lifnei Hashem. You can't bring a door in. And we could say that even according to Rashi and the Rambam, this is about being in the right space. It's not about moving from one space to another. Yes, a shlomim can be brought anywhere within that area. But space is defined not only by dimensions and coordinates. Space is also defined by ambience. You can transform a living room into a bedroom, although the coordinates have not changed. The dimensions haven't changed. All that's changed is the ambience. But it was a living room and now it's a bedroom. And the person in the living room is different from the person in the bedroom. There's a change that takes place. So here too, when the gates of the Heichal open, that space changes. Generally, the gates open in the morning and they stay open the whole day. And that's why Rashi and the Rambam say, we're talking about the morning, but not because of the timing element. Because before the gates are open, that's not a time to bring a gift. You don't bring a gift to somebody at 4 o'clock in the morning where their front door is locked. You don't do that. You wait until the doors are open. It's time to engage with the person. You find the right time, not because of the timing, but because that creates the space in which that interaction can take place. And that leads us to a very interesting idea that we have in Gemara Brochus. Rabbi Eliezer says on Daf Kavches, "Haoseh tfilato keva in tfilato tachanunim." If a person makes his tfilo keva, what does that mean? Says the Gemara further on, Kol tfilato domeh alav kemasui. If you daven in a way where you have to daven, I have an obligation to do, I have to daven, then it's not the same thing. It's not accepted as well. When he says, "Tzarich ani latzeit yedei chavati," it's time for shachlus, I've got to daven. That's not how it should be. And says Rav Kook in the Shmoneh Kvotzim in Tafresh Mem Zayin, "Hatfilah hi tzricha liot kol kach novaat mikirot lev." Tefillah has to come so much from the walls of one's heart, ad shekol chiyuv oseh oto keva, that any sense of obligation transforms the tefillah into an obligation, into I have to. V'zeu yusod shitat hasovrim she'en li tefillah ikar me'atorah. And that's why there are some who say there's no deoraisa to daven at particular times. Says Rav Kook, that's not to say it's less important. That's to make it more important. So the reason you're doing it is not because there's a chiyuv d'oraisa, I've got to daven now. The reason you're doing it is because you want to do it. You want to speak to Hashem. You want to give something to Hashem. And therefore, says Rav Kook, a major chidush. Al kein hachelek hamuvchar biyachas litfilah hi tfilat arvit. And therefore, the most important tefillah is Ma'ariv. Although Shachris and Mincha are obligations because they represent the Korban Tomid of the morning and the afternoon, and the Ma'ariv is a Nadova, you're doing the Ma'ariv as a gift. That gift is the essence of Tefillah. That's the one Tefillah, Shegedolai b'mashi Rishus. The fact that you don't have to daven Ma'ariv, technically, makes it the greatest davening of all. In which case it emerges, if you're doing Ma'ariv as a gift, not as an obligation, where do you have to do it? What did we just learn in Rabbeinu Eliyakim? If you're bringing a gift, you bring a gift to the person. It's got to be lifnei Hashem. So Ma'ariv, in fact, we sometimes think, if I don't get a shul for Ma'ariv, it's not the end of the world. I go for Shachris. I managed to get to shul for Mincha. For Ma'ariv, I daven at home. It comes out according to this. Ma'ariv is even more important to do lifnei Hashem. And lifnei Hashem doesn't mean grabbing a minyan. Lifnei Hashem doesn't mean I grab a minyan somewhere. We're at a wedding, we get together, we make a minyan. That's not lifnei Hashem. Lifnei Hashem is to stand in front of the Aron Kodesh in a place which is a Beis HaKnesses, in a place which is a shul. That's a completely different dimension of lifnei Hashem. I know it's not always practical. People can't always be at shul for Ma'ariv. Mincha is difficult as well. But just to understand the principle, we think Ma'ariv is the least important. Explains Rav Kook based on the Gemara in Brochus. Ma'ariv is the most important because it's like Shlomim. It's a gift. And of all the korbanos, the only one that it says that has to be lifnei oil moed is the Shlomim. As Rav Eliyakim explains, because when you're giving a gift, you're connecting with the other. And in this case, you're connecting with Hashem. And if you're connecting with Hashem, you do it in His space, not in your space. You take the gift to Hashem, and the gate has to be open, the door has to be open, because that transforms the space, the place in which you're bringing your korban shlomim.